Welcome to I guess this is our fourth day already of Thesis. We've already gone through probably 20, what? 3, I can't do the math, 18 so far. We've got lots more to go. So today we're going to start off with Josh, or Owen. Wait, what should I call you, Josh or Owen?
Either's fine.
Owen, we'll start off with Owen. I never can tell because that's the thing. I called him Josh all year long, and then I heard people calling him Owen, and so I have no idea what I should call him. But I really enjoyed talking about his topic with him, looking at children's media and the influence that we see from LGBT agenda being sort of infused within children's media. So we'll start with his topic. These are his words. Owen says, I would like to thank Mr. Wade and Mr. Brom, who have given me invaluable insights and advice. I would also like to thank my family and friends who have been supportive in this thesis. Owen's title is, Look How They Massacred My Boy, The Complications of Children's LGBTQ. So I'll set up the timer and I'll let you know when you can start, okay?
Sir, could I see the timer?
All right, you can start whenever you're ready.
As you sit by your couch, coffee mug in hand, this is world's #1 dad, and a newspaper in the other. You're about to put the mug aside to put on your reading glasses. Then your son approaches you. With this innocent smile on his face, he says, Dad, I was watching porn, and the shock paralyzes you, from top to bottom. Unwillingly, you drop the mug and it shatters across the floor. And just like the shards, your brain is scrambled. You cannot begin to think, to process what your 10-year-old just said to you. Your son attempts to satiate his own curiosity. But the echoes of his first sentence rings too loud for you to hear him. But you can't really blame him. A 10-year-old is just a 10-year-old. For all he knows, unicorns and tooth fairies are a thing. You begin to wonder, what went wrong? What did you do that caused your son to commit such a grave error? Was it something that you did? Or perhaps it was something that you didn't do? Your thoughts resurfaced, and you can't remember the last time that you had talked to your son about what to do when faced with problems of sex and profanity. This is the sad reality of most children. But what does this have anything to do with the thesis? Although exposure to pornography for children may be slim, exposure to other elements that are heavily correlated with pornography, such as LGBTQ, is not as slim. We must also take into account the fact that LGBTQ has been actively pushing their agenda towards children's media. Lately, LGBTQ has been sparking for attention. Their radical ideas have inspired numerous young adults. It started in the 19th century as a human rights movement. Its main purpose was to fight against prejudice, actions, and judgments against gay people. By the 20th century, it sprouted into numerous organizations. Although the movement had initial resistance, eventually it started seeping into positions of power, whether politically or influentially. To mention a few examples, Barack Obama, former president of the United States, legalized same-sex marriage in the US. Some mega corporations, such as Nike or Adidas, have claimed to support the movement. Other companies, such as Disney, who are notoriously known for their child-themed products, have also claimed to support the movement and have included LGBTQ themes within their works. In a survey of 23 countries, statistics have shown that the percentage of people who agree with the movement outweighs the percentage of people who don't, averaging around 30 to 40% more. This includes the perception of same-sex parents being perfectly capable to efficiently raise a child. Now, in this thesis, there are recurring definitions, and to reduce misunderstanding, I will be mentioning some of them. Children in this thesis are underdeveloped people below the age of 13. Propaganda is a way of spreading biased information that is typically false and has a hidden agenda underneath its message. LGBTQ in children's media is the display, mention, or affiliation of any LGBTQ values within children's media. And with the ever constantly changing definition of LGBTQ, currently it is called LGBTQIA+. And to reduce misunderstanding, I will be referring to LGBTQIA+, or any other past or future definitions or abbreviations as LGBTQ. Before I go any further, I would like to remind in good faith that this thesis does not implicate any LGBTQ involvement in adult media, nor does it aim to antagonize LGBTQ as an organization, idea, or a movement. The only purpose of this thesis is to conserve children's innocence and protect their natural growth. And with the growing power of LGBTQ, their ability to disrupt children's natural growth grows more hazardous by the minute. This thesis implicates the fact of whether or not people truly support the movement has little relevance to the movement itself. If the public were to see that these powerful companies and these influential people were to heavily support the movement, then the public perception would be as such. This thesis implicates how LGBTQ has been actively pushing their agenda towards children's media. This thesis will cover three main values, which are biblical values, importance of parenthood, and the flaws of implementing LGBTQ within children's media. Firstly, the media has been used as a tool of propaganda. Secondly, this action of inclusivity by LGBTQ as an attempt for tolerance is not a solution and should not be treated as one. Lastly, parents should be first to be responsible for children and not the media, especially in times of moral dilemmas. Now, before I get into my first proof, I would like the audience to imagine a young, blonde 12-year-old girl. Her name is Elizabeth. As of now, Elizabeth is sitting in the living room. She's playing with her dolls. And as she plays with her dolls, she is passively listening to a radio talking about how juice boxes have toxic elements within them that are harmful to the body. Later that night, she then goes on to the cinema to watch a movie with her parents. The movie's main message is about self-gratification, how eating sweets is healthier than fruits. And then the next morning, in school, beside Elizabeth's teacher is a poster. The poster's message is also about self-gratification, completely unrelated in the content it shows in the movie. However, intrinsically, it pertains to the same message, self-gratification, supporting the people's decision to consume whatever they wish. This might sound like a hellish nightmare, as it sounds unrealistic, and it doesn't sound applicable to our real world. However, this exact scenario happened in 20th century Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany had targeted important aspects of life, such as education, media, and culture, to enforce Nazi values such as the glorification of Hitler and the Aryan race, and the justification and normalization of prejudiced actions against the Jews. Nazi Germany had targeted 4 types of media: newspapers, radio, films, and posters. This method of propaganda was really effective until undeniable heavy losses were in the front faces of the citizens. If this was achievable by Nazi Germany over 80 years ago, then there is no reason for propaganda to be impossible now. Even if propaganda may not be as extreme as it was back then, there is no reason for propaganda to be not as potent and unable to change our behavior and our perception. Secondly, propaganda is growing rapidly with the help of modernization and technology. Propaganda has been a common practice throughout history. If less and less people believe it, then there is no reason for it to stop. There is research that proves how massive misinformation and massive miscommunication can spread from just a single perpetrator, meaning that a single person could be responsible for massive propaganda. If a single person could be responsible for such massive propaganda, imagine the damage that could ensue from an organization or a movement as big as the LGBTQ. Social media itself is a two-edged sword. Although it benefits as a catalyst for spreading information, it has no control of the nature of the content it's spreading. Social media itself acts like an echo chamber, meaning that it is personalized for each user. Whatever we see is based on our own algorithms, customized to our own behaviors and our own beliefs. Social media can and will be the devil on your left shoulder, enforcing misplaced thoughts and belief. Keep in mind that this study was done towards adults. If it is this potent against adults, imagine the damage it could do towards children. Lastly, the media has been normalizing talks of sex and profanity in both children's and adults' media. Currently, children's media is being implemented with LGBTQ values. This gradual process of normalization is called desensitization. Desensitization can be considered a form of propaganda itself and has been done since the mid-1900s. Because desensitization is a process of changing cultures, inevitably, parents are included within this process as well. A survey was done that included 1,000 parents. Each parent was shown videos with strong themes of violence and sex in a random order. Parents would showcase a downward trend, meaning that early on, they would be strict with the type of content that their children would see, but later on became more lenient within their judgment. This means that parents would agree with the type of content that their children would see after a certain amount of exposure. As stated previously, LGBTQ is attempting to include inclusivity as an attempt for tolerance within children's media. This action of inclusivity, however, is not a solution and should not be treated as one. Firstly, kids will be exposed to themes of violence and sex, which will then handicap their adolescent growth. There's research that correlates indecent exposure to numerous problems within children. To mention a few examples, this can lead to desensitizing a kid's behavior, blur boundaries, and overall interfere with their healthy sexual development. Secondly, LGBTQ has an active agenda targeting children's media. Companies like Netflix, Nickelodeon, and Disney have shows from ages 7 to 12 that have direct and indirect representations of LGBTQ. In total, there are around 7 shows that have direct representations and 12 that have indirect representations. Each of these shows, such as Scooby-Doo or Avatar's Legend of Korra, have amassed millions of viewership each and are well known for their content. Even though the themes shown within children's media may not be as extreme as it is in adult media, it still poses a probable risk for children. With the common occurrence of desensitization, it is very likely that the themes shown within children's media would eventually become more radical. Thirdly, there are other alternatives to LGBTQ's attempt at tolerance that offer better results. There's research that supports how kids can enhance their emotional and social skills if parents were to guide them regarding attention, balance, and compassion. Said values would be incorporated within children since early childhood. Tolerance is derived from empathy, and empathy from compassion. If compassion has become a core value within children since early childhood, then inevitably, children would practice tolerance within their social surroundings. Before I get into my third proof, I would like the audience to imagine a dark, gloomy hospital room. The curtains are closed, and the air is littered with the smell of death. On the bed, you see a child embroidered with all sorts of tubes and plugs. Her voice is taken over by the constant sound of a dying heart monitor. On the edge of the room, you see a father. His constant pacing around disturbs the silence of the room. His thoughts grabs the attention of anyone who would dare go inside. This father, this man, had spent all of his savings, all of his time, and his future for the small possibility, the small chance of saving his only daughter. This man is not special in him wanting to save his daughter. This father's love is not exclusive to just a single parent. Any parent would and will sacrifice just as much as this man had to save their only sons and daughters. This chivalrous act of a parent is exactly why parents should be first to be responsible for children instead of the media, especially in times of moral dilemmas. Firstly, it is the natural order of things for parents to take care of their children. God has deemed parents the natural guardians of children. The Bible has countlessly shown that God values and adores children. If God did not think that parents were the natural guardians, then why would God entrust something that He values and He adores to someone He thinks is incapable of guarding children? Secondly, there is plenty of guidance from the Bible towards parents that has been proven to work scientifically. An example of this is the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs was written by King Solomon during the prosperous times of the Israelites. The book's main message emphasizes the importance of maintaining biblical values during prosperous times, as it is very easy to be swayed by worldly desires when we are at our peaks. One of said values is to integrate biblical values towards your children as a parent during prosperous times. This means that the book stresses the importance of teaching our children about the biblical ways during prosperous times, as it is very easy to be swayed by worldly desires and forget about biblical values. There's also research that proves religious values incorporated within children would later benefit them when they reach adulthood. This research states that religious values have an undeniable impact over a person's character and overall emotional intelligence, especially in moral dilemmas. This means that if religious values were to be incorporated within children since early childhood, this would later make them more emotionally intelligent and more emotionally aware within their social surroundings. Thirdly, because of their bias and agenda, LGBTQ is inept at handling sensitive information. As stated previously, when it comes to children, the first person responsible should be parents and no one else. If you were to choose the media to be responsible for your children, it would be the equivalent of picking out a random 7-year-old in the park to take care of your 5-year-old. Some articles, even pro-LGBTQ articles, have stated that within their studies, LGBTQ has failed to truly represent themselves within the media. This can create harmful image and stereotypes that are often untrue about LGBTQ. Even if LGBTQ are able to truly represent themselves within the media, their values do not align with what children need. This means that after rigorous and various attempts of integrating LGBTQ values within children's media, their values would still be harmful and completely unnecessary for children. Now, some might argue that inclusivity is necessary because of tolerance. They believe that inclusivity can cause a growth of tolerance for children. While it is true that compassion and tolerance are valuable core skills for children, inclusivity cannot cause tolerance. Inclusivity does not cause compassion or tolerance, but rather ignorance and negligence. If you were to teach inclusivity to children from early childhood, this would only teach children to accept unnatural things the way they are. Other researchers also support the fact that provocative images can cause either distress or pleasure for children. This means that inclusivity can cause either an early addiction or cause discomfort amongst children. Other researchers have also stated that practicing empathy and compassion is enough for your children to learn about said values. So not only inclusivity is completely unnecessary, it is also harmful for your children. Others may argue that children should know about LGBTQ so as to be able to tell apart right from wrong. They believe that if children were not taught about LGBTQ, they would not be able to differ what is decent and indecent in terms of public perception. This would leave them clueless in dealing with such situations. While it is true that children should eventually be able to tell apart right from wrong, children, however, should not be exposed to LGBTQ under any circumstance. If exposed, children would make poor judgment regarding sexual topics in the future. Instead, we should implement valuable core values within children so that eventually they would be able to develop their own sense of morality and their own critical thinking skills. Eventually, children will be able to decide right from wrong from the guidance of parents and their own personal growth. If we teach LGBTQ is wrong towards children from the get-go, this would only result in making them prejudiced against LGBTQ and reduce their overall sense of tolerance. Throughout this thesis, we have discussed why LGBTQ should be prohibited within children's media. From the media being an unreliable tool due to propaganda, to inclusivity being a horrible solution, to the importance of parenthood, and we have also seen the implications of LGBTQ within children's media, from mental distress, addiction, to an overall moral decline. In this thesis, we have also seen the best Christian solution towards tolerance. Not only can emphasizing biblical values help your children grow biblically, but it also aligns with scientifically proven values that improves our own morality. falling to the conclusion that LGBTQ should not be within children's media. Now, imagine that we go back to the very first scenario of this thesis. You sit by your couch, mug in hand and a newspaper in the other. Your son approaches you. He complains about this group project he has in school. He says that his friend is barely contributing to the group project. He doesn't want to work alone, but nor does he want to jeopardize his friend's grades. You, as a father, validate his feelings. You tell him, feeling angry is completely normal, and feeling compassion at the same time is incredible. You ask your son whether this was the first occurrence or not. Depending on the answer, you tell him. If this was the first time that it had happened, you tell your son to gently warn his friend and ask him if there's anything hindering him from contributing to the group project. If this was a recurring event, however, you tell your son that he is forced to tell a teacher, as this will also teach a valuable lesson for your friend. So, what does this mean for us? How do we expect to go up against a movement that has over 50% support from the civilians in the Western Hemisphere? Well, the answer is simple. This is a call to action, specifically to parents or any parental figure. Firstly, safeguard your children and raise them according to biblical values. Secondly, even though it may seem impossible, it does not warrant us to become passive watchers. As citizens of a democratic country, we have a right to voice our concerns regarding LGBTQ, and we have a responsibility towards later generations to ensure a brighter future. Even though it may seem trivial now, every little bit helps into making a better future. Lastly, this does not ensure us to be prejudiced against LGBTQ. If we are to teach biblical values towards children, then it is very important that we incorporate biblical values to ourselves and practice them from our day-to-day lives. In short, let us become the rightful guardians for our children and that we were meant to be and strive to live by biblical principles. Thank you.
Great job, Owen. Our panelists today are Miss Bethany and Miss Brenda. I will give each of you about 8 minutes to ask questions. Miss Bethany, would you like to start?
Sorry, do you mind if I drink? Okay.
Hello. Oh, okay. Good job, Owen.
Thank you.
Very well spoken. I really enjoyed your the images that you brought up of the young children with the parents and all that. Thought was very good. Imagery really brought you to it. And so I have a few questions. My first is about the LGBTQ agenda. And so you said this word a lot. And so you mentioned the agenda, the movement. And I just wanted to ask for clarification. What is this agenda? What is the ultimate goal?
Okay. Thank you for the question. So in this context, specifically towards children's media, based on the research that I've studied, there are two agendas from LGBTQ. Firstly, being they want to promote tolerance by including inclusivity within children's media. It's a recurring theme in the many articles that I've read. And the second agenda being having inclusivity just for the sake of it within children's media.
How would you define inclusivity?
In this thesis, how I would define inclusivity is a bit similar to DEI, which is showing unnecessary the minority group within the media. Okay.
So I think some would argue that the LGBTQ movement started as a movement against violence and discrimination against that group of people that have that belief system. Has that changed at all? Is that no longer an issue? And so now they've moved on to another one, or is it still an issue based on your research?
Thank you for the question. So I think to add a little bit, I think a notable scenario that happened was back in the 70s, if I remember correctly. It is called the Stonewall Incident. It happened in New York, and it was basically it was a riot, and hundreds of gay people were, hundreds of LGBTQ people were hurt in the process, and dozens of people died. And this was done because the oppression from the police. And to answer your question, I believe although that ever since the Stonewall incident, there may not be as extreme cases of violence, I believe that there is still cases of violence from both the sides that don't agree with the LGBTQ and the side that agree with the LGBTQ.
So, based on your thesis, the LGBTQ is trying to get their representation in children's media and represent their values. What are some of those values, and how are they different from secular values that are already present in children's media? So maybe things like violence, if maybe there's a kid's show where you get revenge on somebody who did you wrong, but that goes very much against biblical practices. So things like that. How does these values differ from those things that are already present?
Sorry, could you clarify by secular values?
Sure. So things like you mentioned, I think Avatar, right? Legend of Korra. I think in that show there's quite a bit of violence. There's quite a bit of fighting. There's quite a bit of vengeance. Maybe even inappropriate language at times. Or I know there were shows my mom didn't let me watch because they said words like stupid or crap or something like that. So those things are already present in children's media. So in what ways is the LGBTQ values, in what ways are those values different, or maybe not worse, but maybe worse?
Okay. Thank you for the question. To me, based on the research I've done, a value that stands out is, as I've mentioned, is the DEI, which is inclusivity. Unnecessarily showing the minority group just for the sake of it within the media.
I have one more. Hang on. I have to find it. Oh, yes. Okay. You mentioned how we should not expose children to LGBTQ under any circumstances, and that we can teach empathy and tolerance and compassion without doing so. So my question to you is, how do we teach empathy and how do we teach tolerance without talking about people who believe different things than we do, and without talking about people that are different from us?
Thank you for the question. So, even though we may have different values, I personally believe that some values everyone would have a standard set of values, and some of them are including tolerance and compassion and empathy. And to answer your question regarding how do we teach children, so based on the research that I've done, I've taken a citation from a book called The ABCs. I don't remember the exact title, but it's called The ABCs. And the ABCs are attention, balance, and compassion. So regarding the ABCs, just to add a little bit, attention refers to how a parent can enhance a child's ability to focus on the present, essentially making them more committed in their work. Balance refers to how a child can develop their emotional intelligence so as to emotionally become more mature. And compassion is fostering kindness to themselves and to others. And the book basically emphasizes these three values. And as a parent, the book basically tells the parent to practice said values with your children, so they would sort of mirror your values.
Very good. That's all I have. Thank you. Good job.
Miss Brenda.
Okay. Thank you, Owen. Personally, I feel reassured looking at a young generation talking about this topic. I'm a newlywed, and this is one of my concerns because I wish to be a parent as well, right? And I also have the same concern as to how the young children are exposed about this topic through in their hands, the social medias in their hands. And at this point, I'm not really sure what are the ways to prevent 100% for kids to not being exposed by this. But interesting topic. Thank you. Just want to be clear, or I just want to make sure where do you stand. So I also see this phenomenon through social media, newspaper, and I must say I also agree that this happened at the front of our eyes. Gotta be realistic. But from what I see and from what I heard from this community, their argument is that they just want to be heard, they want to be seen, right? Therefore, they need exposure, and that's why they use media to reach people, especially the young children, right? So the kids are aware of their existence, basically. And then they, just like you say, they teach children to have empathy towards the LGBTQ because they think that they were and they are still considered as victims. And especially in this era where we have same-sex parents, which also adopt children, or maybe they have children born of one of the parent. Therefore, they agree. Their argument was they agreed that these values the LGBTQ values must be exposed through media to help these parents. But I just want to clarify, where do you stand? Like, do you think like we really must limit like 100% these children below 13 should not ever learn about the LGBTQ, or like, is there other way for parents to, maybe make them a little bit understand? Because I think the reality of this world, they are everywhere, and they are in their hands of the kids in social media. But what do you think? Like, where do you stand for this?
Thank you for the question. So, personally, for me, I have a fundamental belief in not exposing LGBTQ towards children. It's why I wrote the thesis. And to answer your question regarding what to do as a parent, like what should we do towards children? Should we limit them to 100% or 30%? I believe that, personally, for me, children should not be exposed to LGBTQ under any circumstance. However, the case is that we're unable to fully control the perspective of our children's lives. Even though we try to limit as best as we can, inevitably children would still be exposed to LGBTQ values. But I would like to add that this also doesn't mean that we shouldn't, as a parent, we shouldn't just give up. As a parent, we have a responsibility for our children. And there are safeguards to implement for your children. For example, being Google Family or YouTube Kids. Both safeguards essentially filters out sensitive content for your children within the media. And I would also like to add a little bit regarding the radical side of LGBTQ. It is true that LGBTQ, they may seem rather radical, but I believe personally that it is because of social media. They would tend to show the more radical side of the LGBTQ. Because based on the articles that I've read, the main purpose, one of the purposes of LGBTQ, including inclusivity within children's media, is to promote tolerance, which in itself is a noble goal. They want children to practice empathy and foster kindness towards the minority. However, I do believe that the method in which they try to promote tolerance is misguided.
Thank you for clearing that up, Owen. I have one more question, actually. In your thesis and in your explanation before, you explained about how there were organizations that helped build this movement, and it seems like it's quite effective because recent years their community seems to grow and grow, and they are more approved than some people that may oppose, maybe like you and I. And then these organizations, I think government are involved in establishing these organizations, right? Of course, because they have to get approved, but they are very effective. But then my concern is that since we are against organizations, do you think government is also like an important holder? Because in this case, in your thesis, you say that parents are the core, which I agree, parents are the core. But in many cases, parents must obey the law, right, made by the government. So it seems like they were forced, may I say forced, even though it's opposed to their beliefs, right? And then the government wants to desynthesize all this. And since parents are like a nuclear family, and seems like we want to go against all these organizations and government, what do you think? Like, is it just like the parents? Do you think like the parents is the only capable or strong enough to be against this government or organization? What do you think?
Thank you for the question. So, as stated previously, even though it may seem a bit impossible for a single person or a group of individuals to go against the government or an organization as big as the LGBTQ, I believe that it is still worth a try because LGBTQ is mostly based in liberal countries, meaning that most of them are based in democratic countries in which citizens have a right to voice their concerns. And to add a little bit, the government may seem supportive towards the action, towards the movement, but there are other parts of the government that are against it. An example of this is the bill from Florida. It's the Don't Say Gay bill. It's basically for, I do not remember the exact age, but it is for preschool kids. And the bill states that no children in said criteria should be exposed to LGBTQ under any circumstance. And at the same time, the bill also protects the rights of LGBTQ teachers.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. So I think based on this, government actually could help the parents. What do you think? Right.
Yeah, I believe that the government itself has a responsibility for the people, and that includes both the LGBTQ people and the people who are against it. This means that the government can't just take one side just because we're in one side. The government has to take a neutral stance. But by taking this neutral stance, their action must reflect their stance itself. They cannot take an action that will dramatically support the opposition or the other.
Thank you, Owen. I think that's all from me.
Thank you, Ms. Brenda. So there are several questions that came in from your peers and a few other things. And so let me ask you this. You sort of implied, at least in the beginning, that there's this link between pornography and LGBTQ. And I think the LGBTQ community would argue with that. They would say, oh, no, we're not promoting pornography. Is there such a link? What do you think, Owen?
Thank you for the question. Although there are no articles that directly state that their inclusivity is directly linked to pornography, I believe that this is largely due to because most of the media or most of the articles that are written are based in liberal countries in which they are most of them are supportive against LGBTQ. Supportive for LGBTQ. So it is very in rare cases you're able to find an article that goes against LGBTQ. But I also believe that inclusivity is very closely related to pornography, as they both mention the same values. LGBTQ itself promotes pornography for in the adult media. And with the common occurrence of desensitization, as I've said in my thesis, it's very likely that eventually we'll grow numb to these radical values and will eventually accept more radical themes within children's media.
Okay, would you say that in children's media, just the very existence of same-sex marriages and things like that within children's media causes children to start wondering about sexual things that perhaps they would not think about until later in life?
Thank you for the question. So an article I've read states that indecent exposure, with being, for example, same-sex marriage displayed within children's media, although it does not lead to children becoming an LGBTQ in the future, it does lead to an overall moral decline, meaning that they would have less empathy and less kindness after consuming the content in the media.
Okay, good. As Miss Bethany was kind of talking about, there's a lot of things in this world that we can't really shield our kids from completely. In fact, we can't really shield our kids completely from LGBTQ very well, right? In other words, maybe our children certainly will have friends in school who will talk all about it to them. And so what do we do in that case? I mean, maybe we can sort of put it out of the media, but we can't shield our kids from it in their school environment and in their friends who we don't know much about. What do we do?
So as I've answered the questions before, it's similar. Even though it may seem impossible, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. As I've said, we have a responsibility towards children to safeguard them. And I would like to add a little bit. Eventually, children would develop their own sense of morality and their critical thinking skills. And when they reach this stage, as a parent, we also have a responsibility to teach them regarding LGBTQ, to say what parts of them are right and what parts of them are wrong.
Okay, yeah. So, and so that's what some people would say. They say they might argue it doesn't. You shouldn't keep us from putting whatever we want in the TV. It's the parents. It's their responsibility to talk to their kids about all these things. And so, what would you say to that person that says it's really just the parents' responsibility to talk to their kids about these things when we can put whatever we want in the media?
I'm sorry. To clarify, is that from the perspective of like the friend that is?
From the perspective of someone who wants to, an LGBTQ promoter, right? They may say, well, it's your responsibility to talk to your kids. We can put what we want to in the media. You've already said the role of the parent is super important. Mm. So isn't that the focus? The parents need to take care of their kids and talk to them about all these things. It doesn't matter what we put in the media, but you're saying that we should stop it in the media. Well, a promoter of LGBTQ material might say, no, it's your responsibility as a parent. You shouldn't tell me what to do.
Okay, to answer your question, even though outsiders from the family may not have direct responsibility towards their children, they also do not have any right to interfere with the relationship of children and parents. If they were to interfere, this would only create a strain in the relationship for parents and children. And to add a little bit, this applies both ways for people who are pro-LGBTQ and who aren't pro-LGBTQ. So, for instance, if you're not pro-LGBTQ, you don't have the right to say your parents are wrong about this, but at the same time, you're able to basically be friends with the person. You're able to show kindness and empathy with the person.
Okay, good. Well, time is up. Good job, Owen. Great job. So what we'll do is we'll meet parents and friends and advisors and panelists over here for photographs, and then we will have a little bit of a break and have our next thesis at about 10 minutes.